The battlefield was chaos. Explosions shook the ground, sending dust and broken metal into the air. Soldiers of different species shouted in strange tongues, some fighting for survival, others for victory. The smell of burning fuel and blood mixed with the sharp sting of ozone from energy weapons. In the middle of it all, a human medic pushed forward, his jaw tight, his eyes scanning the wreckage for the wounded. He had been trained to save lives, not to take them. Where others carried rifles, he carried packs of bandages, vials of medicine, and strange tools designed for quick battlefield surgery. Many soldiers thought him weak, but when screams cut through the battlefield, it was always him who answered. And now, above the ringing in his ears, he heard a scream unlike any other. It was raw, piercing, filled with pain so deep it almost froze him in place. He turned sharply and saw her. An alien girl, young, beautiful, with glowing crimson skin and long white hair matted with blood. She lay sprawled on the ground, her hands clutching at the remains of her leg. The blast had torn it apart. Jagged shards of bone and burned flesh made it clear she would not live long without help. Around her, soldiers rushed past. None stopped. Some glanced at her and turned away. To them, she was only one more casualty, one more body the war would claim. But to the human medic, she was not just another number. She was alive. And alive meant there was still a chance. He sprinted to her side, dropping to his knees in the dirt. Her eyes, wide with fear, locked on his. For a second, she flinched, as if expecting him to finish what the mine had started. But instead of drawing a weapon, he pulled out his medical kit. "Stay with me," he said firmly, his voice calm even as his hands moved quickly. He pressed bandages over the wound to stop the bleeding, but the damage was too great. She gasped in pain, her body trembling, her breath uneven. Her kind was known for strength, for pride, for never showing weakness. Yet here she was, tears streaking through the dirt and blood on her face. Her lips moved, forming words in a tongue he did not know. But he understood the meaning. She was asking why. Why would he help her? Why waste his time on someone who wasn't even human? He didn't answer with words. He only pressed harder on the wound, forcing the bleeding to slow, his hands covered in her blood. He could feel her life slipping away, and he refused to let it happen. The medic's pack clattered open beside him. Inside was a jar glowing with bright blue liquid. Suspended within, it was something not many soldiers had ever seen, a synthetic limb, advanced technology reserved for rare battlefield rescues. It was meant for humans, but he had learned enough to try adapting it for others. He pulled it free, the glass cold in his hand. Around them, the war roared, but in that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the armies clashing, not the smoke, not the risk of being shot where he knelt. Only the girl before him. Her eyes widened when she saw the glowing prosthetic. Her body shivered with pain and fear, but there was something else too. Hope. He laid the jar beside her and spoke softly. "I can save you, but you have to trust me." Her breathing hitched, her gaze flicking from the synthetic leg to his face. For a moment, it seemed she would refuse. Her people never accepted help from outsiders, especially from humans, whom they had always considered reckless, dangerous, even brutal. But her body was broken, her blood pooling fast, and in the look of the medic's eyes, she saw no cruelty. Only determination. She gave the faintest nod. That was all he needed. With a deep breath, he set to work. His hands moved with precision. Guided by training, fueled by desperation. He cleaned the wound as best as he could, sealed arteries, prepared the attachment site. The synthetic leg glowed brighter as he readied it, its surface humming softly like a living thing waiting for purpose. The girl cried out, her scream echoing across the battlefield as he began the painful process. But through her pain, she did not push him away. She clung to the stretcher beneath her, silver hair spilling across the blood-soaked ground, her crimson face twisted in agony. And still, the medic worked, refusing to stop, refusing to let her die. In the chaos of war, where soldiers killed and others abandoned the weak, a single human knelt in the dirt and did the opposite. He rebuilt instead of destroyed. And as the battle thundered on, a bond stronger than any weapon began to form, one forged not in hatred, but in the desperate fight to save a life. The medic's gloves were slick with blood. His arms ached from holding pressure on the wound, but he didn't slow. He had stitched humans under fire, patched soldiers torn apart by explosions, even rebuilt bones with nanofiber. But this was different. This was an alien girl whose body was unlike his own, and every movement carried the weight of risk. She screamed again, her crimson hands digging into the stretcher, as the searing touch of his tools worked through torn flesh. The sound was raw, like something ripped from her very soul. For a moment, he worried the noise would draw enemy fire. But no one came. The war moved on around them, the clash of armies rolling further across the wasteland. They were forgotten. Here, left in the shadow of death, the prosthetic leg gleamed faintly as he prepared to attach it. It wasn't just metal and wires. It was a creation of living alloy, capable of bonding with muscle and nerve. It was a miracle of human engineering, meant to restore broken bodies. But this was the first time he would try it on someone not of his species. "Stay with me," he muttered, not knowing if she could understand. His voice steadied his own nerves more than hers. He connected the ports, aligned the attachment, and whispered a silent prayer. The hum of the synthetic leg grew louder, its glow brightening as if recognizing the nearness of living flesh. Her body jerked when the first contact was made. A strangled cry tore from her throat. Her silver hair spilled across her face, damp with sweat. He gritted his teeth and continued, sealing nerves to conduits, muscle to alloy. Each step was delicate, dangerous, but he forced himself to trust his training. Minutes passed like hours. The medic's heart pounded, but his hands stayed steady. He thought of the hundreds of times he had been told humans were too reckless, too wild, too untamed for the galaxy's standards. And yet here he was, refusing to abandon someone no one else would save. At last, the final seal clicked into place. The leg lay still, attached but lifeless. For one terrible moment, he feared it had failed. Then the glow pulsed once, twice before spreading across the alloy. The synthetic limb shivered, responding to the girl's body as it sought to bond. Her breathing hitched, and her wide eyes locked on him. She whispered something broken, weak, but it carried meaning. A question. Would it work? Would she live? He leaned close, his voice firm and calm. Yes, you will walk again. Slowly, the leg responded, twitching with the first hint of motion. The bond was taking. Relief washed over him, but he did not relax. The next hours would decide everything, whether her body accepted the limb or rejected it. Exhaustion tugged at his muscles, but he didn't leave her side. He adjusted the bandages, cleaned the blood, and checked her pulse. She stared at him, her gaze intense even through the pain. No one had ever touched her people with such care. No one had ever dared. For the first time she spoke a single word he understood, her accent heavy but clear. Why? He froze for a moment, surprised. Then he answered simply, because you're alive, and that's enough. Her lips trembled. She turned her head away, unable to meet his eyes. Yet he could see the conflict on her face. She had been taught to see humans as dangerous, untamed, never to be trusted. But this one had knelt in the dirt, risking everything to give her life back. The sounds of the battle grew faint in the distance, replaced by the quiet hum of the synthetic leg. The medic leaned back, wiping his hands clean, his body finally giving in to fatigue. But he didn't leave. He stayed beside her, ready to fight death itself if it came back for her. The alien girl closed her eyes, her body trembling but alive, She had screamed in agony, nearly lost to despair. Yet now, as the glow of the synthetic limb pulsed softly in rhythm with her heartbeat, she clung to something she never expected to find on a battlefield. Hope. The human medic didn't rest. His body was heavy with exhaustion, but his mind refused to let go. He sat beside the alien girl as her new leg glowed faintly, the hum of its systems blending with her ragged breaths. Every so often, she shifted, her face tightening in pain, but she was alive. That was what mattered. The battlefield had quieted. Distant rumbles echoed where the fighting had moved, but here the wreckage lay still, dotted with broken machines. And the fallen. The medic's ears caught faint voices approaching, sharp and unfamiliar. He tensed, his hand moving instinctively toward the pistol at his belt. 3 alien soldiers appeared through the smoke. Their armor bore the same crest as the girl's, their weapons raised high. They froze at the sight before them, their young warrior sprawled on a stretcher, a human kneeling over her with blood-stained gloves and a glowing prosthetic attached. To her body. The medic rose slowly, lifting his hands to show he meant no harm. The soldiers barked harsh words at him, their voices filled with suspicion. He didn't understand their language, but their posture said enough. They thought he had harmed her. Before they could act, the girl's voice cut through the tension. Weak but firm, she called out to them. The soldiers stiffened, their weapons lowering slightly. She struggled to lift herself, her hand trembling. As it touched the synthetic limb, her silver hair clung to her face, but her eyes were steady. She spoke again, longer this time, her voice commanding even through her pain. The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. One of them stepped closer, his weapon lowering fully. His gaze flicked between the human medic and the glowing leg. Confusion and disbelief twisted his features. To them, the idea of a human saving one of their own, rebuilding her with technology meant for his people, was unthinkable. The girl raised her voice again, and this time the medic understood a single word she repeated alive. She was telling them he had saved her. The soldiers hesitated, then reluctantly backed away a step. The medic let out a slow breath, lowering his hands. His heart still hammered in his chest, but the girl had bought him a fragile moment of trust. He crouched again, checking the connections on the prosthetic. The leg pulsed brighter now, responding more strongly to her body. She winced as it twitched, her nerves struggling to adapt, but she didn't cry out. Instead, she kept her eyes on him, watching every movement with an intensity that felt heavier than the battle itself. One of the soldiers barked something sharp. The medic glanced up, frowning. He didn't understand, but their gestures were clear. They wanted to take her. They wanted him to step away. The girl shook her head. Her hand shot out, weak but determined, and caught the medic's wrist. The soldiers stared, stunned. Never had they seen one of their kind reach for a human. In such a way, her grip tightened, and she whispered a single word in broken human speech. "Stay." The medic's chest tightened. He nodded once, firmly, and her hand relaxed, but she did not let go. The soldiers muttered among themselves, uncertain. They could not deny what they saw, the impossible bond forming between human and alien. At last, they lowered their weapons completely. Though their eyes never left him, the medic worked in silence, finishing the final adjustments. When he was done, he guided her carefully, helping her sit upright. Her body trembled with the effort, but she forced herself to move. Slowly, with his support, she lowered her new leg to the ground. The metal gleamed as it touched the dirt. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a shudder, the limb responded, locking into place as though it had always been part of her. She gasped, her crimson face lifting in shock. Her toes synthetic, glowing faintly, shifted and curled. The soldiers stood frozen, their disbelief plain. To them, it was sorcery. To her, it was a miracle. To him, it was simply his duty. She turned her head, silver hair falling across her glowing skin. and whispered something only he could hear. A word from her own tongue, heavy with emotion, but one that needed no translation: grateful. For the first time since the battle began, the medic felt the weight on his chest ease. He gave her a faint, tired smile. He had saved lives before, but never like this. Never with someone who should have been his enemy. And as the alien soldiers watched, unsure whether to fear or to honor what they witnessed, the bond between human and alien grew stronger, rooted not in war but in the unshakable act of one who chose to save instead of destroy. The medic stayed close as the alien girl tested her new leg. Each step was shaky, her face tight with pain, but the synthetic limb responded faithfully, glowing softly as it adjusted to her body. Every tremor of movement was progress, every stumble a victory. The alien soldiers hovered nearby, their eyes filled with suspicion and unease. They spoke to each other in sharp whispers, their tones harsh. The medic couldn't understand their words, but their body language said everything. They didn't trust him. They didn't believe this act was free of cost, but the girl silenced them with a glare. Even weakened and trembling, her presence carried weight. She raised her chin, crimson skin glowing faintly in the smoke-lit air, silver hair trailing around her face. She spoke to her soldiers with a strength that surprised even the medic. Her words came steady, commanding, and though he didn't know the language, he knew the meaning. He saved me. Respect him. The soldiers lowered their heads reluctantly. None argued further. The medic supported her as she walked further, helping her balance, guiding her steps. Her hand gripped his arm firmly, each time she leaned on him to steady herself. She hated weakness, he could see it in her eyes, but she didn't push him away. That in itself was a revelation. Hours passed. The fighting in the distance faded to silence. The medic set up a temporary shelter in the ruins, using scraps of fabric and metal. He gave her water, then carefully checked the bonds of the prosthetic again. The limb's glow was stronger now, steady, like a heartbeat. She watched him closely as he worked. Her gaze lingered on his scarred hands, on the determination etched into his face. She was young, trained as a warrior, told humans were brutal and selfish. Yet here was one who had risked his life, not to kill, but to save. At last, she broke the silence. Her voice was hoarse, her accent heavy, but the human words came clear enough. Why risk for me? He looked up, meeting her eyes. Because no one else did. Her lips parted, but no words followed. For a moment, her fierce expression cracked, revealing something fragile beneath. She had been abandoned by her own soldiers when she screamed in pain. Yet this outsider had stayed. The soldiers returned with a transport sled, crude and battered. They motioned for her to board. She shook her head, refusing. Instead, she placed one step forward, then another, her synthetic leg carrying her weight. Each movement was defiant, a declaration. She would not be carried. The medic walked beside her, ready to catch her if she fell. She didn't fall. When they reached the alien camp, silence spread like a wave. Dozens of her kind turned to watch, their eyes wide. Whispers rippled through the crowd as they saw the glowing limb, the human at her side, the impossible truth. Before them, some stared in awe, others in anger. Many recoiled, muttering words that carried scorn. A human had touched one of their own. A human had given her life when even they would not. The girl ignored them. Her head remained high, her steps steady. When they entered the command tent, the officers inside froze, their gazes sharp with shock. She stood tall, her synthetic leg gleaming beneath the torchlight. Then, in a voice filled with iron, she spoke to them. Her words were harsh, defiant. And though the medic couldn't understand, he knew what she was saying. She was alive because of him. She would not be ashamed of it. The officers looked at him with thinly veiled disdain. To them, he was an intruder, an outsider who had crossed a forbidden line. Yet they could not ignore the truth standing before them. Their young warrior was alive, walking. Because of the human dot, the medic remained silent, his hands resting at his sides. He didn't care for politics or pride. He cared only that she lived. But he could feel the tension in the room like a blade at his throat. Later, when the crowd dispersed, she sat beside him by the fire. The night was quiet now, the stars shining cold above. She turned her gaze to him, her eyes softer than before. "You gave me leg," she said slowly, struggling with his language. Then, with effort, she added, "You gave hope." He didn't answer at once. Instead, he looked at her synthetic limb glowing faintly in the firelight, then at the strength in her posture. "No," he said finally, shaking his head. "You gave yourself hope. I just helped you stand." Her silver hair caught the firelight as she looked away, but the faintest smile touched her lips. For the first time, she didn't feel like a broken warrior. She felt alive again, and sitting beside her, the human medic knew he had done more than save a life. He had started something that neither of their peoples could have expected, something that would shake the walls of pride and fear that had divided them for so long. The alien leaders gathered in a circle, their tall frames draped in armor etched with glowing patterns. The air inside the chamber was thick with tension. Torches burned along the walls, their flickering light casting long shadows across the ground. The girl stood in the center, her new synthetic leg gleaming in the firelight, the human medic at her side. The commander's eyes locked on the limb first, then on the man who had given it. Disgust mixed with disbelief in their stares. One of them slammed a fist onto the table, speaking in their sharp, guttural tongue. His voice rose higher, filled with anger, and though the medic couldn't understand the words, he knew the tone. They saw him as a trespasser, a corrupting presence, something that didn't belong. The girl's jaw tightened. Her crimson face glowed faintly as she raised her chin, silver hair falling across her shoulder. She spoke back to them, her words firm, her voice carrying the weight of command. She was not begging for his life. She was not apologizing for what had been done. She was challenging them. The chamber fell into silence. The commanders shifted uneasily, glancing at one another. The prosthetic pulsed faintly as she shifted her stance, the hum of its living alloy filling the quiet dot at last. The eldest commander spoke, his voice cold but measured. He gestured toward the human and then at the girl. The message was clear. The prosthetic was unnatural, unclean. They would never accept it. The medic thought they might try to tear it from her. His body tensed, his hand inching toward the pistol at his belt. But before he could act, the girl stepped forward, her new leg striking the ground with a heavy thud. "No." The word was broken, accented, but it was human language. The commanders froze, their eyes snapping to her. She pointed at the medic with a trembling hand. Her voice rose, strong despite the weakness in her body. "He saved me. You left me. He stayed." Her words cut through the chamber like a blade. The commanders stared at her, stunned into silence. Never before had one of their kind defended a human in their tongue. Never had one dared to shame their leaders in front of witnesses. The medic felt the weight of every eye turned to him. He stood, tall, refusing to shrink back, though his heart thundered in his chest. He didn't want to be a symbol. He just wanted to save lives. Yet here he was, held up as proof of something far greater. The eldest commander finally snarled a command. Guards moved forward, weapons drawn. The medic tensed, ready for a fight he knew he couldn't win. But the girl moved faster. She stepped between him and the guards, her synthetic leg locking into place with a hiss of living alloy. Her voice rang out, sharp and unyielding. "He is mine." The words echoed through the chamber. The guards froze. The commanders exchanged startled glances. For a warrior of their people to claim a human so openly was unheard of. But her tone left no room for argument. The guards hesitated, then lowered their weapons. The eldest commander growled in frustration, but said nothing more. At last, with a sharp gesture, he dismissed them all. When the chamber emptied, the girl sank onto a bench, her body trembling with exhaustion. The medic knelt beside her, checking the synthetic limb, making sure it had not been damaged. She watched him silently, her eyes burning with something fierce and unspoken. Finally she spoke, her words slow but deliberate. "They fear you, they hate you, but I trust." The medic looked at her, meeting her gaze. Her silver hair glimmered faintly in the torchlight, her crimson skin glowing with the strength of someone who had already defied death. "I don't need them to trust me," he said quietly. "Only you." Her lips trembled, and for a moment, the warrior mask she wore slipped away. She wasn't just a soldier, wasn't just a survivor. She was someone who had been abandoned and found hope in the last place she expected, outside the chamber. Whispers spread through the camp. Stories of the human medic and the alien girl with the glowing leg passed from mouth to mouth. Some told it as a warning, others as a miracle. None could deny what they had seen. And in the silence between them, as the fire burned low, both human and alien understood the truth. What had begun as an act of mercy on a battlefield was now becoming something much larger. Something that could change everything. The days that followed were heavy with silence and whispers. Wherever the alien girl walked, her synthetic leg glowing faintly with every step, eyes followed her. Some filled with awe, others with disgust. The story had already spread far beyond the camp about the human medic who defied death itself to rebuild her, and about the warrior who dared to stand beside him. The medic stayed close. He repaired her bandages, adjusted the limb as her body continued to adapt, and guided her through each new step. She grew stronger each day. At first, she leaned on him heavily, every stride a battle. But soon her balance steadied, her steps grew bolder. The synthetic limb became part of her, not a weakness but a weapon. One evening, as the sky burned crimson and gold, she trained again. With her spear in hand, she moved through her drills, her synthetic leg striking the ground with thunderous rhythm. Each swing of her weapon sent sparks through the air, her body moving with fierce grace. The soldiers who once doubted her now stood watching in stunned silence. She was no longer broken. She was reborn. When she finished, her chest heaving, she turned to the medic. Her eyes blazed with pride, but also something deeper. She pointed at the leg, then at him. "Your gift. My strength." He shook his head. "No, your strength was always there. I just gave you a chance to use it again." She studied him for a long moment, then stepped closer. Her silver hair brushed against his shoulder as she leaned forward, her voice soft. "You are not like others. You are more." The words carried more weight than she knew. For her people, to admit such a thing was rare, almost forbidden. But she didn't care. He had changed her fate. He had stood when all others turned away. Later, the commanders summoned them again. This time, the atmosphere was different. No fury, no scorn. Only unease. They had seen her fight with her new leg. They had heard her claim the human as hers. They could not deny her strength, nor the truth of her survival. The eldest commander spoke, his tone harsh but restrained. He gestured at the medic, then at her, his words sharp and clipped. She listened, then raised her chin, replying with fire in her voice. The exchange grew heated, but she never wavered. At last she slammed the butt of her spear against the floor, the sound echoing like thunder. The chamber fell silent. Her final words rang with defiance. "Without him, I am dead. With him, I live. Choose which you honor." The commanders said nothing more. Their silence was the closest thing to acceptance they could offer. That night, she and the medic sat together outside the camp, the stars stretched endless above them. The war had not ended. The galaxy still burned with conflict. But here, in this fragile peace, Something new had been born. She looked at him, her expression softer than he had ever seen. "You gave me more than leg, you gave me future." He met her gaze, his voice steady. "And you gave me purpose." The firelight reflected in her silver hair, in the glow of her crimson skin, in the faint hum of the synthetic leg. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was not empty, it was full. Full of everything they had endured. Full of everything that might come next. The alien girl who once screamed in despair now stood tall, her new strength a beacon. The human medic who once fought only to save lives had become something more, proof that even in the heart of war, humanity could build, not just destroy. Together, they had defied fear, pride, and death itself, and together, they would walk into whatever future awaited them, one step at a time.